My mother-in-law brought a gift for my 6-year-old son, smiling like nothing was wrong. At first, he seemed excited, then he backed away. He wouldn't touch it again. When I examined it myself, my hands started shaking. I didn't accuse her. I gathered evidence. By the end of the week, the truth surfaced. But before I begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Maple Creek, Indiana was the kind of town where people waved even when they didn't like you. They smiled at the grocery store, asked about your weekend at the post office, and remembered your children's names at church. It was a place where everyone knew everyone, and privacy was less a right than a rumor. Lena Foster had learned that lesson early. During her first week in town 7 years ago, when she'd walked into the diner with Ethan's hand in hers and felt every eye turned toward them like searchlights. She'd felt the weight of judgment then, the quiet calculation behind those friendly greetings. They were measuring her, deciding whether she belonged, whether she was good enough for one of their own. She'd passed their test, barely. She'd smiled back, learned their names, attended their potlucks. She'd played the part they needed her to play. But she'd never forgotten that first moment of scrutiny. Never forgotten that, in a town like Maple Creek, acceptance was conditional, and the conditions could change without warning. Now, standing in her living room on a humid Sunday afternoon in late June, watching her mother-in-law's silver sedan pull into the driveway, Lena felt that old wariness return. The air conditioning hummed in the background, struggling against the heat pressing in through the windows. Outside, cicadas droned their relentless summer song. Brenda Holloway stepped out of her car carrying a wrapped box and a smile that stayed on her face a second too long. The smile was practiced, perfectly calibrated to look natural while concealing something beneath. Lena had seen that smile before, usually right before Brenda offered some piece of advice that wasn't really advice at all, but criticism dressed in concern. "She's early," Lena said quietly, more to herself than to Noah, who was playing with his plastic dinosaurs on the carpet. Noah looked up, his dark hair falling into his eyes. He had Ethan's eyes, that same warm brown that could look gentle or guarded depending on the light. Right now they were guarded. "Is Grandma here?" he asked. Before Lena could answer, the doorbell rang. 2 sharp chimes that seemed louder than usual in the afternoon stillness. Lena smoothed her hands over her jeans and walked to the door. She took a breath, arranged her face into something neutral and polite, and opened it. "Brenda, we weren't expecting you until 3. I know. Brenda stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, bringing with her a cloud of floral perfume that made Lena's nose itch. "I finished at the salon early and thought, why wait? I've been so excited to see my grandson." The emphasis on my was subtle but deliberate. It always was. Brenda was 58 and looked a decade younger, thanks to careful maintenance and expensive skincare. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, her clothes pressed and coordinated. She looked like someone who had never made a mistake, never struggled, never doubted herself. She looked like someone who expected the world to accommodate her. "This is for Noah," Brenda said, holding out the wrapped box. Her voice was cheerful and loud, the kind of volume that filled a room and demanded attention. Noah had gotten to his feet when his grandmother entered. He stood there now, small and uncertain, looking at the box like it might contain something dangerous. "Come here, sweetheart," Brenda said, kneeling down to his level. "Don't you want to see what Grandma brought you?" Noah took 2 steps forward, then stopped. He stared at the box. The wrapping paper was bright blue, covered in cartoon trucks and cars. His favorite things. Brenda knew what he liked. She always paid attention to those details. Then Noah shook his head and stepped back, moving closer to Lena's leg. "I don't want it." The words came out quiet but firm. Noah wasn't looking at Brenda anymore. He was looking at the floor. Brenda laughed, a sound like wind chimes that didn't quite match the tightness around her eyes. "Don't be silly, honey. Look, it's a truck. You love trucks." She started to unwrap the box herself, tearing at the paper with quick, efficient movements. Beneath the wrapping was a plain brown shipping box, the kind that came from online orders. No store packaging, no brand logo visible. Noah took another step back. Lena felt something tighten in her chest, a warning signal she'd learned to trust over the past 6 years of motherhood. Noah wasn't a shy child. He wasn't dramatic or prone to tantrums. When he refused something, when he pulled back like this, it meant something felt wrong to him on an instinctive level. "Noah," Brenda said, her voice still bright, but with an edge creeping in. "Come look at it at least." He said no, Brenda. Lena kept her voice even. "Maybe later." Brenda stood up, the smile still fixed on her face. "He's just being stubborn. All children go through this phase." "He's not being stubborn. He's making a choice." For a moment, something flickered in Brenda's expression. Something cold and assessing. Then it was gone, replaced by that practiced warmth. "Of course. I didn't mean to push." She set the box down on the coffee table with exaggerated care. "Well, it's here whenever he wants it. I picked it out specially. Went to 3 different stores before I found the perfect one online. The perfect one online. Not from a store. Ordered from somewhere anonymous, untraceable." Lena's warning signal grew louder. "That's very thoughtful," she said, "because that's what you said to your mother-in-law in Maple Creek. You acknowledged the gesture even when you didn't trust it." Brenda stayed for another 20 minutes, making conversation about her garden and the new restaurant opening downtown. She asked about Ethan, who was at the hospital finishing his shift. She mentioned that Noah seemed quieter than usual. Thinner maybe. Was he eating enough? Each comment landed like a small stone thrown into still water, creating ripples that would spread long after Brenda left. When her mother-in-law finally drove away, Lena closed the door and locked it. She stood there for a moment, her hand still on the deadbolt, feeling the weight of something she couldn't quite name. Noah had gone back to his dinosaurs, but he kept glancing at the box on the coffee table, wary, watchful. "You okay, buddy?" Lena asked, kneeling down beside him. He nodded, but his shoulders were tense. "You don't have to play with it if you don't want to." "Why did Grandma bring it?" he asked. "Because she loves you, but it feels weird." Out of the mouths of children. Truth without filter, instinct without justification. "Yeah," Lena said quietly. "It does feel a little weird, doesn't it?" That night, after Noah was asleep, really asleep, not fake asleep to get 5 more minutes of reading time, Lena walked back downstairs. The house was quiet except for the old refrigerator's constant hum and the occasional creak of settling wood. Through the kitchen window, she could see fireflies blinking in the backyard, small points of light appearing and disappearing in the darkness. The box sat where Brenda had left it, wrapped in its cheerful blue paper. Lena picked it up. It was heavier than it should be. She bought Noah enough toy trucks to know their weight, their balance, the feel of plastic and metal, and the batteries they contained. This was different. The weight wasn't distributed right. It pulled toward one end, like something dense had been placed inside. She carried it to the kitchen table and sat down under the bright overhead light. For a moment, she just looked at it, turning it over in her hands. Then she carefully peeled back the wrapping paper, trying not to tear it too much. Underneath was that plain brown box, sealed with clear packing tape. She found scissors in the drawer and cut through the tape. Inside, nestled in bubble wrap, was a red dump truck. It looked normal enough. Die-cast metal, working dump bed, rubber wheels. No brand name on the bottom. No safety labels. No battery compartment that she could see, though most trucks this size didn't have one anyway. But it was still too heavy. Lena had grown up with a mother who ignored warning signs, who made excuses for people who didn't deserve them, who chose to believe the best even when the worst was staring her in the face. Her mother had paid for that willful blindness with years of misery, and Lena had promised herself, had sworn on everything she held sacred, that she would never be that kind of parent. She would never ignore her instincts, Never dismiss the small voice that said something was wrong. She went back to the drawer and found a small screwdriver from the toolkit Ethan kept in there for quick fixes. Her hands were steady as she examined the truck, looking for seams for access points. She found one along the undercarriage, nearly invisible unless you knew what you were looking for tiny screws held it in place. She removed them carefully, laying each one on the table in a neat row. The bottom panel came off with a soft click. Inside, fitted precisely into a hollowed-out space where there should have been solid metal, was a small black device. Rectangular, about the size of 2 quarters stacked together. There was a tiny lens on one end and a pinpoint LED light on the other. The light was green and blinking slowly. On. Recording. Lena sat very still. She could hear her heartbeat in her ears, feel the blood pounding through her veins. Her hands wanted to shake, but she wouldn't let them. She set the truck down gently on the table and took slow, measured breaths. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the way her therapist had taught her after her mother's funeral, when grief and anger had threatened to pull her under. Brenda hadn't made a mistake. This wasn't an accident, wasn't paranoia, wasn't Lena seeing threats where none existed. Brenda had planned this, had ordered this device, had modified this toy, had wrapped it carefully and brought it to their home with that too bright smile on her face. Lena thought back through the past year, through all the small comments and pointed questions, the suggestions that weren't really suggestions, the concerns that weren't really concerns. You work too much, dear. A child needs his mother present. Noah seems confused lately. Is everything okay at home? A boy needs stability. He needs routine. He needs to know his parents are solid. And the worst one whispered once in this very kitchen, 6 months ago, when Ethan had run out to grab takeout and Brenda had stayed behind, waiting. She'd stood at this counter with her coffee mug and looked at Lena with eyes that held no warmth at all. A mother who cheats can't raise a boy right. Children sense these things. They know when something's broken. Lena had never cheated, had never even thought about it. She loved Ethan, loved their life together despite its imperfections. But Brenda hadn't been making an accusation. She'd been laying groundwork, planting seeds. Now Lena understood why. Brenda didn't need truth. She needed evidence that looked like truth. She needed ammunition for a war Lena hadn't known they were fighting. Lena picked up her phone and searched for the device model. It took 15 minutes of careful searching, cross-referencing images and specifications. But she found it. A wireless recording device marketed for home security, but commonly used for surveillance. It could record continuously for up to 48 hours before needing a recharge. It could transmit audio directly to a paired phone or computer, and it was small enough to fit inside a child's toy. Legal for security purposes, highly illegal for covert recording in a private home without consent. Lena set her phone down and looked at the disassembled truck, at the innocent red paint and rubber wheels, at the device that turned a gift into a weapon. She could destroy it, smash it, throw it away, pretend she'd never found it. She could confront Brenda immediately, drag this into the open. Or she could do something Brenda would never expect. Lena carefully reassembled the truck, screwing the bottom panel back into place with steady hands. She wrapped it back in its blue paper, making sure every fold was exactly as it had been. Then she placed it back on the coffee table, right where Brenda had left it, and then she started paying attention. Over the next week, Lena watched. She watched how Brenda texted more frequently, asking about Noah, about their schedule, about whether he was playing with his new toy. She watched how Ethan's responses to Brenda's messages grew longer, more detailed, as if he felt the need to justify or explain things that had never needed justification before. She watched Noah avoid the truck, even though she'd suggested he could play with it once or twice. He'd shake his head and choose something else, and she didn't push. If anything, she respected his instincts more than ever. Most importantly, she watched her own behavior. She became conscious of every word she spoke in her house, every phone call, every conversation. She imagined Brenda on the other end, listening, recording, searching for something, anything that could be twisted into evidence of inadequacy or misconduct. Lena worked as a school counselor at Maple Creek Elementary, 3/4 time so she could be home when Noah got off the kindergarten bus. She'd built a career helping other people's children navigate their problems, and now her own mother-in-law was treating her like an unfit parent. On Thursday afternoon, a week after Brenda's visit, Lena was in her home office returning emails when her phone buzzed with a message from her friend Rachel, a family law attorney 2 towns over. "Coffee this weekend? I need to tell you about this insane case I'm working on." Lena stared at the message for a long moment. Then she typed back, "Yes. Saturday morning? I might need some advice too." She wasn't ready to explain everything yet, not even to Rachel. But she was starting to understand that this situation was bigger than family drama, bigger than interpersonal conflict. This was something that could escalate into legal territory, and she needed to be prepared. Ethan came home that evening tired and distracted. He was a nurse in the intensive care unit, and his shifts left him emotionally drained. He kissed Lena on the cheek, ruffled Noah's hair, and went to shower before dinner. At the table, Noah picked at his chicken nuggets, while Ethan talked about a patient who'd coded twice during his shift and somehow survived both times. "Toughest 70-year-old I've ever seen," he said, stabbing his fork into his salad. "Fought like hell to stay alive." "That's good," Lena said. "That he made it." "Yeah." Ethan looked at his plate. "My mom called today during my break." Lena kept her expression neutral. "Oh." She wanted to know if Noah liked the truck. "He hasn't really played with it yet." That's what I told her. She seemed kind of upset about it. He looked up, and there was something uncertain in his eyes, something that made Lena's stomach knot. She said she spent a lot of time picking it out, said she ordered it special. She did. "So why isn't he playing with it?" "Because your son has better instincts than both of us," Lena thought. "Because he can sense something wrong even when he can't articulate it." "He's in a phase," she said instead. "You know how kids are. They fixate on certain toys and ignore others. Last month, he only wanted to play with those dinosaurs. This month, it's the building blocks." Ethan nodded slowly, but the uncertainty didn't leave his eyes. "Mom thinks something's wrong." "With Noah?" "With, I don't know. She said he seemed off when she visited. Withdrawn. He was shy because he hadn't seen her in a while. That's normal, I guess." Ethan pushed his salad around his plate. "She also said you seemed tense." Lena set down her fork carefully. "Did she?" "She's worried about you. About us. She said you work a lot, and maybe it's stressing you out." There it was. The first real volley. Brenda wasn't just planting seeds anymore. She was watering them, nurturing them, helping them grow in her son's mind. "I work 3/4 time," Lena said, keeping her voice even. "The same schedule I've had since Noah was born. The same schedule that lets me be here when he gets home from school. I know that. Do you?" Ethan looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" Lena wanted to tell him everything. Wanted to drag him to the coffee table right now, disassemble that truck in front of him, and make him see what his mother had done. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the exhaustion in his face, the way his shoulders slumped from a shift that had demanded everything from him. Maybe it was the knowledge that once she spoke these words, once she revealed this truth, there would be no going back. Their family would fracture along lines that were already starting to form. "Nothing," she said. "I'm glad your mom cares. But Noah's fine. We're fine." Ethan nodded and went back to his dinner, but the conversation sat between them like a third presence at the table. Lena could feel it there, heavy and undeniable. After Noah was in bed, after Ethan had fallen asleep on the couch watching a medical drama he'd seen 3 times before, Lena went back downstairs and stood in the living room. The truck was still on the coffee table, still recording, still watching. She walked past it to the window, and looked out at the dark street beyond. A few porch lights glowed in the distance. A dog barked somewhere, lonely and insistent. Maple Creek at night was the kind of quiet that made you believe in safety, in community, in the goodness of neighbors who waved even when they didn't like you. But Lena knew better now. She knew that danger didn't always announce itself with sirens and threats. Sometimes it came wrapped in blue paper, carried by someone who smiled and called you dear, and told her husband that she was worried about his wife, about his son, about the stability of his home. Sometimes danger looked like concern, like love, like family. Lena turned away from the window and went upstairs to bed. She didn't sleep well that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that blinking green light. Every time she started to drift off, she heard Brenda's voice in her mind, whispered and certain. A mother who cheats can't raise a boy right. And she knew, with the cold clarity that comes in the darkest hours of the night, that this was only the beginning. The cracks started appearing slowly, like ice splintering across a windshield. Small at first, barely visible, but spreading with inevitable geometry. Lena noticed Ethan growing distant in the way that people do when they're carrying questions they don't know how to ask. Not angry. He was never angry with her, but uncertain, watchful, like he was trying to solve a puzzle that didn't have all its pieces visible yet. It started with small things. He'd look at her a beat too long when she was on the phone. He'd come home from work and walk through the house like he was searching for something, though he could never say what. He'd check his phone more often, scrolling through messages with a frown that deepened by degrees. 3 weeks after Brenda's visit, on a Tuesday evening in mid-July when the heat pressed down like a physical weight and the air conditioning fought a losing battle, Ethan came home and asked his first strange question. They were making dinner together, one of those rare evenings when his schedule aligned with hers and they had time to cook instead of ordering takeout. Lena was chopping vegetables while Ethan stood at the stove, stirring pasta sauce that bubbled and popped. "Do you talk on the phone a lot when I'm not home?" he asked. The question came out of nowhere, sandwiched between his comments about needing to buy more basil and wondering if Noah would eat zucchini if they hid it in the sauce. Lena's knife paused mid-slice. "What?" "On the phone. Do you make a lot of calls during the day?" "I mean some. Work calls. Talking to parents about students. The normal stuff." She looked at him. "Why?" Ethan kept stirring, watching the sauce instead of her. "Just curious." "That's not a just curious question, Ethan. My mom mentioned she tried calling you last week and your line was busy. And then she tried again an hour later and it was busy again. So she complained to you about it?" "She didn't complain. She just wondered who you were talking to. For so long." Lena set down the knife. She could feel anger starting to build in her chest, hot and immediate. "I was probably on a call with the school district. We're planning programming for next year. Those meetings run long." "Okay. Is it not okay?" I said okay. But he didn't sound like it was okay. He sounded like he was filing away her answer, comparing it against some other information he'd received, trying to determine which version fit better. "Ethan, what is this really about?" He finally looked at her, and there was something in his expression that made her stomach drop. Doubt. He was doubting her, and he didn't even realize how clearly it showed on his face. "Nothing." "Forget I asked." But she couldn't forget. And when she checked their shared cloud account that night after Ethan fell asleep, the account they'd set up years ago for photos and documents, the account neither of them paid much attention to anymore, she found folders she didn't recognize. New folders created within the past 2 weeks. Locked with passwords she didn't know. Her hands shook as she typed in different combinations, trying to guess. Ethan's birthday. Noah's birthday. Their anniversary. Nothing worked. Finally, on a hunch that made her feel sick, she tried Brenda's birthday. The folder opened. Inside were audio files. Dozens of them. Each one labeled with a date and time. Lena plugged in headphones and clicked on the first file. Her own voice filled her ears, talking to Rachel on the phone about weekend plans. Except the recording was edited, chopped up, sentences rearranged, pauses removed. "Don't tell Ethan," her voice said. "Getting tired of this. Need something different. Can't keep pretending." The conversation had been about surprise party planning for Ethan's birthday next month, about keeping the secret, about being tired of the same old birthday dinners, about needing something different this year, about pretending she didn't know what gift he wanted, so it would be a real surprise. But edited like this, stripped of context and reassembled, it sounded like a confession, like someone planning an affair, talking about being trapped, about living a lie. Lena listened to 3 more files. Each one was the same. Her voice, her words, twisted and manipulated until they told a story that had never happened. She sat in the dark of their bedroom with the headphones on and the computer screen glowing blue and understood exactly what Brenda was doing. This wasn't just surveillance. This was fabrication. Brenda was building a case, constructing a narrative brick by brick, editing reality until it matched her vision of Lena as an unfit mother, an unfaithful wife, a woman who couldn't be trusted with the care of her own child. And she was feeding it to Ethan. How much had he heard? How many of these files had Brenda played for him, framed as concern, as evidence, as proof that his mother's worries weren't baseless? Lena wanted to wake him up right now, wanted to shake him and force him to listen to the real recordings, to hear the truth instead of Brenda's carefully constructed lies. But she didn't, because another part of her, the part that had been watching and learning and adapting to this new reality, knew that confronting him now would be a mistake. He was already doubting, already questioning. If she came at him with anger and accusations, it would only confirm Brenda's narrative that Lena was unstable, defensive, hiding something. She needed a different approach. Lena closed the laptop and lay down in the dark beside her sleeping husband. She didn't touch him, didn't curl into his side like she usually did. She just stared at the ceiling and thought. The next day, she made an appointment with Rachel. They met at a coffee shop in the next town over, far enough from Maple Creek that they wouldn't run into anyone who might report back to Brenda. It was one of those generic chain cafes that smelled aggressively of vanilla and cinnamon, filled with college students bent over laptops and retirees lingering over crossword puzzles. Rachel arrived 10 minutes late, harried and apologetic, her briefcase bulging with files. She was Lena's age, mid-30s, with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. They'd met in grad school and stayed close despite living an hour apart. Sorry, Rachel said, sliding into the booth across from Lena. "Client crisis. Guy trying to hide assets by transferring them to his mother's name. Like I haven't seen that before." "That's actually sort of related to why I wanted to talk," Lena said. Rachel's eyebrows went up. She set down her coffee and gave Lena her full attention. "Oh." Lena told her everything. The toy truck with the recording device, the edited audio files, the questions Ethan was starting to ask, the way Brenda had been laying groundwork for months, making comments and planting doubts. Rachel listened without interrupting, her expression growing more serious with each detail. When Lena finished, there was a long moment of silence. "Shit," Rachel said finally. "Yeah. Do you still have the recording device?" "It's in the truck, in my living room. Still recording as far as I know." "Jesus, Lena, you need to document everything. Photos, videos, copies of those audio files." Rachel was already pulling out her phone, typing notes. "This is a legal recording in a private residence. It's also potential evidence for harassment, emotional abuse. If she's trying to build a custody case." "Do you think she is?" Rachel looked up from her phone. "You tell me. What does your gut say?" Lena thought about Brenda's comment 6 months ago, about a mother who cheats, about all the questions since then, all the manufactured concern, about the way Brenda watched Noah like she was cataloging flaws, collecting evidence of inadequate parenting. "I think she wants him," Lena said quietly. I think she wants custody of Noah. Then you need to get ahead of this. Document everything. Copy those files before Ethan or Brenda realizes you know about them. Get evidence of the recording device. And honestly, you might want to consider filing a police report. Ethan will never forgive me. Ethan might not have a choice if his mother is building a custody case against you. This isn't about forgiveness or family harmony. This is about protecting your parental rights. Lena wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, feeling the heat seep into her palms. I keep thinking I'm overreacting. That maybe this is just a misunderstanding or paranoia or... Stop. Rachel's voice was firm. You're a mandatory reporter. You're trained to spot signs of abuse. You know what manipulation looks like. Trust your training. Trust your instincts. I do. That's what scares me. They talked for another hour, making plans, discussing options. Rachel explained the legal framework for grandparents' rights in Indiana, the standards of proof required for emergency custody orders, the ways Brenda might try to use edited recordings in court. The good news is that doctored evidence rarely holds up under scrutiny, Rachel said. The bad news is that the legal process is expensive and emotionally brutal. Even if you win, you lose. Then I need to end this before it gets to court, Lena said. How? I'm not sure yet, but I'm working on it. When Lena got home that afternoon, Noah was at his friend's house for a play date and Ethan was at work. The house was empty, silent except for the refrigerator's hum and the tick of the clock in the hallway. She stood in the living room and looked at the red dump truck on the coffee table. Then she picked up her phone and called her colleague Vivian, a school psychologist who specialized in family dynamics. I need advice, Lena said when Vivian answered. About a case, or actually about my case. She explained the situation, clinical and detached, as if she were describing someone else's family. Vivian listened with the patience of someone who'd heard worse, who knew that family cruelty often wore the mask of love. She's weaponizing her access, Vivian said when Lena finished. Classic alienation tactics, undermining your credibility with your husband, positioning herself as the more stable caregiver, creating documentation to support her narrative. What do I do? You document better. You create a counter-narrative that's backed by objective evidence, and you prepare for the possibility that this escalates. Everyone keeps telling me to prepare. No one's telling me how to stop it. That's because stopping it might not be possible. People like this, they're not operating from rational motives. They're operating from need, from belief. She believes she's protecting Noah from you. That belief will justify anything she does. After they hung up, Lena sat on the couch and thought about belief, about how certainty could be more dangerous than malice, about how Brenda probably saw herself as the hero in this story, not the villain. It didn't matter. Heroes or villains, the result was the same. Noah was caught in the middle, and Lena's family was being torn apart by carefully edited lies. She couldn't let that continue. The letter arrived on a Thursday, 3 days after Lena's coffee meeting with Rachel. It came in a plain white envelope, return address from a law office in Indianapolis. Lena knew what it was before she opened it. She could feel the weight of threat inside, the careful legal language that would make violence sound civilized. She opened it at the kitchen table while Noah watched cartoons in the living room, oblivious to how his world was about to change. The letter was written on firm letterhead, signed by an attorney named Gerald Thompson. It was addressed to both Lena and Ethan, though Lena knew Brenda had already shown Ethan a copy. Probably days ago, probably sitting across from him at Brenda's dining room table, while she cried and explained how hard this was for her, how she didn't want to do this but felt she had no choice. The letter opened with pleasantries, with regret and concern. Then it got specific. Our client, Brenda Holloway, has retained this firm to address serious concerns regarding the welfare and well-being of her grandson, Noah Foster. These concerns include, but are not limited to, evidence of emotional instability in the home environment, potential infidelity creating an unstable family structure, irregular parenting practices, and a mother's work schedule that leaves the child inadequately supervised. Lena read each word slowly, feeling them land like punches. While Mrs. Holloway understands that legal action is a serious step, she believes the current situation poses risks to Noah's emotional and psychological development. She has made multiple attempts to address these concerns privately to no avail. As such, she is prepared to petition the court for temporary custody pending a full evaluation of the home environment. The letter went on for another page, outlining Brenda's supposed attempts at communication, her documentation of concerns, her reluctant but necessary decision to involve the legal system. It was persuasive, professional, the kind of letter that would make a judge take notice, that would trigger investigations and home visits and court-appointed advocates. It was dated 3 days earlier. Lena set the letter down and picked up her phone. She called Ethan's cell, knowing he was on his break. He answered on the third ring, and she could hear the tension in his voice before he even spoke. "Hey, when were you going to tell me?" Lena asked quietly. A pause. Then, "I wanted to talk about it in person." "You've known for 3 days." "I know. Ethan, this letter says your mother thinks I'm an unfit parent, that I'm cheating on you, that Noah isn't safe with me. She doesn't think you're a bad parent. She's just," he stopped, seemed to search for words. "She's worried. She thinks something's wrong, and I told her we could handle it ourselves, but you didn't disagree with her." Another pause, longer this time. In that silence, Lena heard everything she needed to know. "I don't think you're a bad mother," Ethan said finally, "but I do think something's wrong. You've been different lately, distant, and some of the things Mom has mentioned, they make sense when I really think about them." "What things?" "Like how you're always on the phone, how you seem stressed all the time, how you snap at me over little stuff, how Noah seems unsure around you lately." Each accusation was a distortion of truth. Yes, she was on the phone doing her job. Yes, she was stressed because she discovered she was being surveilled in her own home. Yes, she sometimes snapped because living with paranoia and surveillance would make anyone short-tempered. And Noah wasn't unsure around her. He was unsure around his grandmother, which was a very different thing. But Brenda had twisted each detail just enough that it looked like evidence. "I can't believe you're taking her side," Lena said. "I'm not taking sides. I'm trying to understand what's happening to our family. What's happening is that your mother is trying to destroy our marriage so she can justify taking our son." "That's crazy." "Is it? Read the letter again, Ethan. Really read it. She's not asking us to go to counseling. She's not suggesting family mediation. She's threatening custody. That's not concern. That's a power grab." She could hear him breathing on the other end, could imagine him rubbing his forehead the way he did when he was overwhelmed. "I need to think," he said finally. "I need to process all of this. While you're processing, your mother is building a case against me, against us. She says she won't file anything if we can work this out ourselves." "And what does working this out look like, Ethan? What does she want?" He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quiet, almost apologetic. "She suggested that maybe Noah could stay with her for a while, just until things settle down, until we figure out what's going on." There it was, the real goal, not evaluation or intervention or help. Custody, control, taking Noah away and calling it protection. "No," Lena said. "Absolutely not. I'm not saying we should. But you're considering it. You're actually considering sending our son to live with her because she wrote a letter full of lies." "They're not lies if I've seen some of the same things." And that was when Lena realized how deep Brenda's poison had sunk. Her husband, the man who'd promised to love and trust her, who'd stood beside her through years of building this life together, he was looking at her with his mother's eyes now, seeing her through Brenda's lens, doubting her because doubt had been carefully cultivated and watered and fed until it grew into something that felt like his own conclusion. "I need to go," Lena said. "Noah will be home soon." "Lena." She hung up. For a long moment, she sat at the kitchen table with the letter in front of her and her phone in her hand. She could hear Noah laughing at something on TV in the other room. That sound, pure and unburdened, was what she was fighting for. That sound was worth any cost. She picked up her phone again and sent a text to Rachel. "I need to copy those files. And I need to do it tonight." The response came back immediately. "I'll send you instructions." "Do you have an external hard drive?" "Yes." "Good. Copy everything. The originals, the edited versions, anything related. And take photos of that recording device. We're going to need evidence of everything." That evening, after Noah was asleep and Ethan still hadn't come home from work, or more likely from his mother's house, where he was probably being fed more carefully edited truths, Lena sat down at their computer and began copying files. The shared cloud account held more than she'd initially found. Weeks of recordings, chat logs between Brenda and Ethan, where Brenda expressed concerns and Ethan responded with increasing worry. Text messages where Brenda asked leading questions and Ethan, exhausted from work and confused by his mother's narrative, provided answers that could be interpreted as confirming her suspicions. There were photos, too, of their house, taken through windows, of Lena talking to a man outside the school, a colleague discussing a student case, but cropped and framed to look suspicious, of Noah looking sad, probably just tired, but presented as evidence of emotional distress. Brenda had been building this case for months, maybe longer, certainly since before she'd brought that truck into their home. As Lena copied file after file onto her external drive, she felt something hardening inside her. Not anger, though there was plenty of that. Something colder and more focused. Determination. She'd spent her entire adult life helping other people's families. She knew the warning signs of manipulation, of abuse disguised as concern. She knew how predators isolated their victims, how they weaponized love and family loyalty. She'd just never imagined her own family would become the case study. When she was done copying everything, when her hard drive was full of evidence and her mind was full of strategy, Lena did something Brenda would never expect. She left the recording device exactly where it was, and then she started recording back. Over the next 2 weeks, Lena transformed her behavior in careful, calculated ways. She became hyper-aware of every word she spoke in her house, every action she took. She stopped making personal phone calls at home. She documented everything: Noah's meals, his activities, his mood. She took photos of them together, videos of bedtime routines and morning rituals. She created a counter-narrative of a careful, loving mother whose only crime was being targeted by someone with more cunning than conscience. But she also did something more aggressive. She started talking to the recording device. Not obviously, not directly, but in ways she knew Brenda would hear. She called her counselor, a real, licensed therapist she'd started seeing after discovering the surveillance, and put the conversations on speakerphone. She discussed Brenda's behavior in clinical terms, documented the timeline of harassment, talked about legal options, ethical violations, the psychological impact of grandparent alienation. She read legal statutes out loud while making dinner, discussing Indiana recording laws and penalties for illegal surveillance. She talked to Rachel on speaker, going over strategies for custody protection, discussing how edited recordings rarely held up under expert analysis. And once, when Noah was playing in the yard and the house was empty except for her and that blinking green light, she said quietly to the room, "I know you're listening, Brenda, and I'm ready." The response came 2 days later, not from Brenda, but from Ethan. He came home early on a Wednesday afternoon, his face pale, his movements uncertain. He'd been staying at his mother's house for the past week, claiming he needed space to think. Noah had asked about it once, and Lena had said Daddy was working extra shifts, which was easier than explaining that their family was fracturing in ways a 6-year-old couldn't understand. "We need to talk," Ethan said. They sat in the living room, the red dump truck still on the coffee table between them, like a piece of evidence at a crime scene. My mom played me more recordings, Ethan said. He wouldn't look at Lena. You've been talking to a lawyer. Planning something. Yes, I have. He finally met her eyes, surprised by her directness. I've been planning how to protect our son from your mother's attempts to take custody, Lena continued. I've been documenting her harassment, and I've been recording evidence of my own. Mom said you'd try to turn this around on her. Ethan, do you remember when your mother brought Noah that truck? How he didn't want it. He was being shy. He was being smart. Lena reached for the truck, feeling the weight of it in her hands one more time. Do you want to know why? Before he could answer, she took the screwdriver from her pocket. She'd been carrying it for days, waiting for this moment, and opened the bottom panel. The device was still there, still blinking. Ethan stared at it. What is that? It's a wireless recording device. Your mother put it in this toy and brought it into our home. She's been listening to everything we say, everything I say for weeks, recording it, editing it, and using it to convince you that I'm an unfit mother. Ethan reached for the truck, took it from her hands, examined the device like it was some alien artifact he couldn't quite process. No, she wouldn't. She would. She did. Lena pulled out her phone and opened a file. Here, listen. She played one of the original recordings, her conversation with Rachel about party planning, and then played Brenda's edited version. The difference was stark, undeniable. Ethan listened to both versions. Then he set the truck down very carefully and put his head in his hands. How long have you known? He asked. 3 weeks. And you didn't tell me? I didn't know if you'd believe me. I wasn't sure how deep your mother had her claws in you. Lena kept her voice even, factual. I needed evidence that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. I needed proof. Jesus Christ. Ethan looked up at her, and for the first time since this had started, she saw something other than doubt in his eyes. She saw clarity. She's been playing us against each other. Yes. She said she was protecting Noah. She said she was protecting him from me. There's a difference. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Ethan said quietly, What do we do? And Lena told him. The invitation came on a Saturday morning, hand-delivered by text message before the sun was fully up. Can you and Ethan come over this afternoon? I think we need to have a family meeting. Clear the air. Brenda. Lena read the message 3 times, analyzing every word. Family meeting was code for an ambush. Clear the air meant Brenda wanted to assert control, to reestablish her authority over the situation she felt slipping away. But Lena had a different plan. She showed the text to Ethan, who was sitting at the kitchen table nursing his first coffee of the day. They'd spent the past 3 days cataloging everything. Every recording, every edited file, every text message where Brenda had manipulated information. Ethan had been quiet through most of it, processing the scope of his mother's betrayal with the hollow-eyed exhaustion of someone discovering that reality was fundamentally different than he'd believed. Are you ready for this? Lena asked. He looked at her, and she saw that something had shifted in him. The doubt was gone, replaced by something harder. Yeah, I'm ready. They got a babysitter for Noah, Rachel's college-age daughter, trustworthy and unconnected to Maple Creek's gossip network. Then they drove to Brenda's house, the 2-story colonial on Elm Street that Ethan had grown up in, with its perfect lawn and American flag hanging by the door. Brenda answered on the first knock, already smiling that bright, false smile. Come in, come in. I've made lunch. We can eat and talk. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and fresh flowers. Everything was immaculate, arranged with the kind of precision that spoke to control rather than comfort. Family photos lined the walls. Ethan as a child, Ethan in his nursing school graduation gown, Ethan and Lena's wedding, Noah as a baby. A careful curation of approved memories. They sat in the living room, Lena and Ethan on one couch, Brenda in her armchair like a queen holding court. "I'm glad you came," Brenda said, folding her hands in her lap. "I've been so worried. About both of you. About Noah." "We know," Lena said. Something flickered in Brenda's expression. A micro-calculation, adjusting to Lena's tone. "I hope you understand that everything I've done has been out of love. I know it might seem harsh, bringing in lawyers, and—" "When did you buy the recording device?" Lena asked. The room went silent. Brenda's smile stayed in place, but it looked painted on now. Artificial. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The one you put in the toy truck." Lena pulled out her phone and brought up a photo. The device nestled in its hollowed-out space. Clearly visible, clearly intentional. "When did you buy it?" Brenda looked at Ethan, seeking support, finding none. His face was stone. That was for safety," Brenda said carefully. "I was concerned about what Noah might be hearing at home. Children need to be protected from adult conversations that might confuse them. So you decided to record everything said in our home without our knowledge or consent," Lena stated, "which is illegal in Indiana, in case you weren't aware." "I was protecting my grandson." "From what? From his mother? From a stable home? From parents who love him?" Brenda's smile finally fell away. What replaced it was colder, more honest. "From a woman who I'm not convinced is being faithful to my son. From a situation that feels unstable." "Yes. Based on what evidence?" "I have recordings." "You have edited recordings," Lena interrupted. "Doctored audio files where you cut and rearranged my words to create conversations that never happened. Would you like to hear the originals? Compare them to what you've been playing for Ethan." She pulled out a small speaker and began playing clips. First the edited versions that Brenda had created, then the unedited originals with full context restored. With every playback, Brenda's face grew tighter. "I was trying to highlight the important parts," Brenda said when Lena finished, "to show Ethan what he wasn't seeing because he's too close to the situation." "You were lying," Ethan said. His voice was quiet but cutting. "You took Mom's words and twisted them into something she never said. You made me doubt my wife based on conversations that you fabricated." "I didn't fabricate anything. Those are her words." "Rearranged and stripped of context until they told a completely different story," Lena said. "That's called fabrication. It's also called fraud, and it's definitely illegal." Brenda stood up, her composure cracking. "I did what I had to do. You're not the right mother for that boy. You work too much. You're distracted. "I'm not you," Lena said, standing to meet her. "That's what this is really about. Noah isn't being raised the way you raised Ethan. I'm not the kind of mother you were. And you can't stand that you don't have control over how we're parenting our child. You think you're so perfect, so educated, so much better than me." Brenda's voice was rising, her careful facade crumbling completely. "But I see what you are. I see how you've manipulated my son, isolated him from his family." "I haven't isolated anyone. You've tried to isolate him from me. You've tried to destroy our marriage so you could position yourself as the more stable option for Noah's care. You've tried to make Ethan choose between his mother and his wife, knowing that either choice would tear him apart. Because you don't deserve him." Brenda shouted. "You don't deserve either of them. You came from nothing, from that broken home with that awful mother, and you're going to ruin my grandson the same way. That's enough." Ethan's voice cut through the room like a blade. He was standing now, too, his hands clenched at his sides. "Don't talk about Lena that way. Don't talk about her mother that way. And don't pretend this is about protection when it's really about control." Brenda turned to him, tears forming in her eyes. Real or performed, it was hard to tell. "Ethan, honey, I'm trying to help you." "By spying on my wife? By editing recordings to make her sound like she's having an affair? By threatening to take our son away?" He shook his head. That's not help, Mom. That's sabotage. I gave you everything, Brenda said, her voice breaking. I raised you by myself after your father left. I sacrificed everything for you. And this is how you repay me? By choosing her. This isn't about choosing. This is about you crossing every boundary there is. This is about you trying to destroy my family because you can't accept that I have a family separate from you. Lena watched Brenda's face cycle through emotions, grief, rage, denial, calculation. She was looking for an angle, a way back into control. But Ethan had finally seen the truth, and once you see manipulation for what it is, it loses its power. I want you to leave, Brenda said finally, her voice cold. Both of you. Get out of my house. We'll leave, Lena said. But first, you need to understand something. She pulled out a folder from her bag. Thick, organized, labeled. She set it on the coffee table between them. This contains copies of everything. The unedited recordings. The edited versions. Proof of the illegal surveillance device. Screenshots of your texts to Ethan where you manipulated information. Photos of you outside our house, taking pictures through our windows. Documentation of every comment, every innuendo, every attempt to undermine my credibility as a parent. Brenda stared at the folder like it was a snake coiled to strike. I've already given copies to my attorney, Lena continued, and I've filed a formal report with the police. Illegal recording, harassment, attempted parental interference. They're taking it very seriously. You can't prove any of that would hold up in court, Brenda said, but her voice was shaking. Maybe not. But the process itself would be interesting, wouldn't it? Having a judge examine these recordings. Having a custody evaluator interview you. Interview us, interview Noah. Having your lawyer explain why you thought it was appropriate to bug your grandson's toy. Having the community of Maple Creek find out that you've been running a surveillance operation on your own family. Lena stepped closer, close enough that she could see the fear starting to edge out the anger in Brenda's eyes. You wanted to play games with my family, Lena said quietly. You wanted to manipulate and control and destroy. But you forgot something important. I'm a mandated reporter. I'm trained to spot abuse. I know how predators operate, how they isolate victims, how they twist reality, and I document everything. You're threatening me, Brenda whispered. No, I'm protecting my son. There's a difference. Ethan picked up the folder and handed it to his mother. This is over, Mom. You don't contact Noah. You don't contact Lena. You don't come to our house. If you want to see me, we can meet somewhere public after I've had time to figure out if I even want a relationship with you anymore. But you're done with my family. Brenda looked between them, seeming to age in real time. Ethan, please. I said we're done. They left her standing in her immaculate living room, surrounded by carefully arranged photos of a family she'd tried to control into oblivion. The legal proceedings that followed were swift and decisive. The police investigation confirmed a legal recording, and while the prosecutor ultimately decided not to press criminal charges given the family relationship and lack of prior record, the investigation itself created a paper trail that would follow Brenda if she ever tried to file for custody. Rachel helped Lena file for a protective order that barred Brenda from contact with Noah or unsupervised contact with their property. The judge granted it after reviewing the evidence, calling Brenda's behavior deeply concerning, and noting that the deployment of surveillance equipment in a child's toy represents a profound violation of trust and privacy. Brenda's lawyer withdrew from her case. The custody threat evaporated before it could become real. For weeks after, Lena felt like she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. She'd checked the locks twice before bed. She'd scanned new toys for hidden compartments. She'd listened for unusual sounds in the house, phantom recordings that weren't there. But slowly, carefully, life returned to something resembling normal. Ethan moved back home after 3 weeks of counseling, both individual and couples therapy. He'd needed time to process his mother's betrayal, to understand how deeply she'd manipulated his perception of his own wife. The therapist had called it a form of psychological abuse, a weaponization of family bonds for control. It wasn't easy. Some nights Ethan would wake up angry at his mother, at himself for believing her, at the situation that had put them all through this. Other nights he'd wake up sad, grieving the mother he thought he had, coming to terms with the one who actually existed. But he was trying. He was there. And slowly, trust was rebuilding between them. Noah adjusted with the resilience children have when adults protect them from the full weight of adult problems. They told him that Grandma needed some time away, that she wasn't feeling well, that they'd see her again someday when things were better. He accepted this the way 6-year-olds accept most explanations, with questions that lasted about 30 seconds before he moved on to more important things, like whether dinosaurs could swim or why the moon followed the car. Lena never told him about the truck, about the recordings, about how his grandmother had tried to take him away. Some truths could wait. Some truths might never need to be shared. The house felt different now, lighter. The air moved more freely. Lena could have conversations on the phone without analyzing every word. She could discipline Noah without wondering if someone was listening, taking notes, building a case. She could breathe. One evening in late September, after the heat had finally broken and the first cool whispers of fall were moving through Maple Creek, Lena sat on the back porch watching Noah chase fireflies in the yard. Ethan was beside her, their hands loosely linked on the armrest between their chairs. "Do you think she'll try again?" Ethan asked. Lena had thought about this question many times. She'd played out scenarios in her mind, imagined Brenda plotting new strategies, finding new angles. "I don't think so," she said finally. She lost too much. Her credibility, her access, her control. And she knows we're watching now. That will document everything. People like her, they need to believe they're winning. Once they realize they've lost, they usually move on to easier targets. "That's a disturbing way to think about my mother." "Your mother is disturbing." He didn't argue. Couldn't argue. Not anymore. "I'm sorry," he said instead, "for doubting you, for not seeing it sooner. She's your mother. She knew exactly which buttons to push with you. It's not your fault that she's good at manipulation. Still, I should have trusted you. You do now. That's what matters." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Noah's small silhouette dart through the gathering dark, laughing as he cupped his hands around another glowing insect. "Do you forgive her?" Ethan asked after a while. Lena considered the question honestly. Forgiveness was supposed to be healing, transformative, the high road that good people took. But forgiveness also required that the threat be neutralized, that the person who'd caused harm showed genuine remorse, that there was something worth salvaging in the relationship. None of those conditions existed with Brenda. "No," Lena said. "I don't forgive her. I don't need to forgive her. What I needed was to stop her, and I did." That's harsh. That's survival. Ethan didn't argue with that either. Later that night, after Noah was asleep and the house was dark except for the soft glow of the nightlight in the hallway, Lena went through her nightly routine of checking locks and windows. It was habit now, probably would be for a long time. In the living room, she passed the coffee table where the red dump truck had once sat. It was gone now, disposed of at a police evidence facility. In its place were Noah's current favorite toys, building blocks and action figures, and a stuffed dinosaur with one eye hanging loose. Normal toys. Safe toys. Toys that were just toys. She stood there in the dark, feeling the weight of what she'd survived, what she'd protected. She thought about all the ways this could have gone differently. All the paths where she'd doubted herself, where she'd made herself smaller, where she'd accepted Brenda's narrative because it was easier than fighting back. She could have lost everything, but she hadn't. She'd been ruthless when ruthlessness was required. She'd been strategic when emotion would have betrayed her. She'd documented and planned and waited for exactly the right moment to strike back. She'd won, not because she was cruel or vindictive, but because she understood that some battles aren't optional. Some fights you don't walk away from. Some people will take everything from you if you let them, and the only way to stop them is to be willing to fight harder, smarter, and with absolutely no mercy. Lena had learned that lesson from her mother's mistakes, from watching someone be too kind, too forgiving, too willing to believe that love could fix what was fundamentally broken. She'd sworn she would never be that person, and she'd kept that promise. Months passed. Fall gave way to winter, winter to spring. Life continued its forward motion, carrying them further from those terrible weeks when their family had nearly shattered. Brendan never contacted them. Lena occasionally heard about her through Maple Creek's gossip network. She'd sold her house and moved to Florida or maybe Arizona, depending on who was telling the story. She'd gotten sick, or she was perfectly healthy but preferred the warmer climate. She was lonely, or she'd found a new community group and was thriving. Lena didn't care which version was true. Ethan's relationship with his mother remained severed. He didn't talk about her much, and Lena didn't push. Some losses took time to process, and some never fully healed. He was working through it with his therapist, and that was enough. Noah thrived. First grade, then second. He made friends, joined soccer, learned to read chapter books. He occasionally asked about his grandmother, less frequently as time went on, and Ethan would give vague answers that satisfied without explaining. One day, years from now, they'd tell him the truth. When he was old enough to understand manipulation, to comprehend how family bonds could be weaponized, to appreciate what his mother had done to protect him. But not yet. Not for a long time. On a Sunday morning in early April, almost a year after Brenda's visit with the truck, Lena was in the kitchen making pancakes when Noah wandered in, still in his pajamas, hair sticking up in sleepy spikes. "Is Dad up?" he asked, climbing onto a stool at the counter. "He's in the shower. Can we go to the park later?" "Sure, if it doesn't rain." Noah nodded, satisfied, and reached for the orange juice. "Mom." "Yeah, buddy." "I like our family." It was such a simple statement, delivered with the casual certainty of childhood. But it hit Lena with unexpected force, made her eyes sting for a moment before she blinked the tears back. "Me too," she said, flipping a pancake. "I like our family a lot." And she did. This small, imperfect, hard-won family that had survived an attack meant to destroy it. This family that was still here, still intact, still theirs. She'd protected it. She'd fought for it. And she'd won. There was no forgiveness in that victory. No reconciliation, no redemption arc for the villain of the story. Just clear boundaries, enforced consequences, and the cold satisfaction of knowing that when threatened, she'd proven herself capable of absolutely ruthless protection. Some people might call that harsh. Others might say she should have found a more compassionate solution, should have tried harder to preserve family ties. Lena didn't care. She'd kept her son safe. She'd saved her marriage. She'd won a war she never wanted to fight. That was enough. Outside, the morning sun filtered through the kitchen window, warming the counter where Noah sat, brightening the room with ordinary light. It was just another Sunday in Maple Creek, Indiana. Another quiet morning in a town where people waved even when they didn't like you, where privacy was less a right than a rumor, where everyone knew everyone. But in this house, on this morning, Lena Foster stood at her stove making pancakes for her son, and she was free. Free from surveillance. Free from manipulation. Free from the threat that had loomed over them for so long. She'd won, and she'd never apologize for what it took to win. The pancakes sizzled on the griddle. Noah hummed a song from school. Ethan's footsteps creaked overhead as he moved around their bedroom. Just an ordinary morning. Just a family, safe and whole. Just the quiet victory of a woman who'd refused to be anything less than ruthless in defense of what she loved.